Hi and welcome back. This is part two and should be the last part. There might be a part three, we'll see. And in this part two, I'm going to take all of my textures that I just downloaded and I'm going to bring them in and start editing them and making them work. And then if it goes on too long, part three will be bringing it all back into Blender and putting it all together. Alright, so I've got my Photoshop opened and I've got a little bit of my desktop showing so I can see my textures that I brought in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with my brick texture and I'm just going to left click and drag that into Photoshop, and you can see that it comes in as a new layer, brick texture 01. And what happens is when you bring it in, it gives you the chance to scale the texture or scale the layer. So I'm going to go ahead and scale it down. So I'm going to hold down the shift key on my keyboard and scale down on one of the four corners. And the reason why I'm holding down shift is so that it doesn't distort the layer. It keeps the height and the width the same. Okay, when you're pretty happy with the scale, the new size, you can press the return key on your keyboard. If you don't like the size of the layer, you can press the escape key. So the number one tool that we're going to be using for this technique is going to be the Move tool. And once you select the Move tool, you want to make sure that your settings are similar to mine. You want to make sure that Auto Select is turned off, and you want to make sure that Show Transform Controls is enabled. And what Show Transform Controls lets you do is it gives you these little boxes going around the layer, and that lets you scale and then eventually rotate and do fun things with it. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move my brick texture down below my UV layer so that way I can see it. Now I need to rotate it 90 degrees. So the bricks are going horizontally with the building. So to do that, to rotate, I'm going to put my mouse pointer outside the layer, and my mouse will change to a double arrow. And I could freely rotate, and that would work. I'm going to escape, but I want it to be precise. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and I'm going to shift and drag. And when I shift and drag, it will do 15-degree increments. And there you go. I've stopped it at 90. Okay, so now I want to scale down some more because it's just not the right size. You have to think about, let me zoom in so you can see this better. You have to think about the average brick. For instance, if you happen to know or you guesstimate that the average brick is 2 inches high, or it's really closer to 3 inches high, each one of these bricks would be 3 inches high. Well, if you think about the average door frame, maybe being 7 feet high, and the average building, how tall is this building? If it's 2 stories tall, 20 feet high, you're going to have to figure out how many bricks would be stacked up to make this building. So you can do a little bit of research and you can of course calculate some numbers, but basically you can see I still have to be thinking about how many bricks is it going to take to get to the top of this building. What you don't want is you don't want something like this. Even though that shows you really nice big textures and that might be pretty to you, it's not realistic. Those bricks would be more like cinder blocks where they're about the size of your head. So you really have to think about that. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make mine about the size of the door height. And then I'm going to press return to tell Photoshop that I like that, that size. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it. And I'm going to go ahead and place it right about there. So now what I need to do is I need to go ahead and make more. So I'm going to, with the Move tool, I'm going to hold down Option, and I'm going to drag off, and I'm going to make another copy. And then I can let go of Option. And then I'm going to need a third one, as you can see. And I can go off screen, as you can see there. And because this was a tileable texture, you can see that it should match up nice and smoothly. And you'll see over here on my right, I have all 3 brick textures here. So with all 3 brick textures here, that looks pretty good to me. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this very first one, and I'm just going to Option drag that away. I'm just going to leave that off to the side. So that's sort of my safety one. And I can use that for later. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to Shift click on the 3 over here, and I'm going to join them together. I'm going to merge them together, and you'll see why in just a moment. So I'm going to click on the very first one, then I'm going to Shift click on the last one, on the third one, and it selects all 3, and you can see them here like that. Okay, now with all three of them selected, I'm going to right mouse click and I'm going to choose merge layers. And now basically they're glued together into one. Now with them glued together into one, I'm going to hold down the Option key and I'm going to pull off another copy and be very careful to try to match it up. Now I have to do this whole length of this building. So again, what I can do is I can select both of these brick strips over here. I'm going to merge them together, Option drag, and I'm basically repeating. You can also use your arrow keys. That's what I'm doing. You can use your arrow keys to nudge things over just a pixel at a time. It's really handy. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and just finish doing this. You'll notice that I'm not paying too much attention around the door. There we go. And unfortunately I'll have to do one more. I like it to be kind of nice and clean, but oh well. And when I get close, I usually just go ahead and use the arrow keys to just kind of nudge it into place. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save. So that looks pretty good. And I think I'm going to go ahead and merge all of those together. Remember that I still have my single tile over here, so I have the right scale. I'm going to flip back over into Blender and see what's what. So if I go ahead and select this one here, you can see that it's the back face, so that one's going to be brick. This is the top of it, so that's going to be brick. This is concrete here. Let's see, that's going to be brick, and that's going to be brick. So, okay, so I'm going to go ahead and brick this thing up here. I'm going to go ahead and move this guy out of the way. And because I have this whole thing done, I can pretty much just Option click and just drag it over, and I'm pretty good to go. One thing that's a little bit of a problem, there we go. Good, and I'm going to Option click again, and that's basically going to be here. Okay, now this is going to be the concrete here, so I'm not going to copy for that one, but then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put the bricks over here, something like that. And it doesn't look like I'm not touching any of the other islands. That's why that island margin is so important. So that looks pretty good there. All right. So now I'm going to go ahead, and it's pretty much rinsing and repeating. So I'll show you a couple others. What I want to really show you is I want to show you the door and I want to show you the window. But for now I'm going to go ahead and bring in the asphalt, as that is another texture. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that no layers are selected. I'm going to drag in the asphalt texture, and you can see it comes in on its own layer, so that's good. It's way too big, so I have to scale it down, thinking about texture size. Again, with this one, you can't really think about the same size like you can with a brick. You just have to kind of eyeball it and use your best common sense. So I'm going to put the asphalt underneath the UVs because I want to be able to see it. And I'm still thinking that that's still a little on the big side, so I'm going to go a little smaller. So now I can probably fit maybe two of them there like that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and leave it like that. And I'm going to do just the exact same technique that I used on the there we go. Okay, I'm going to make it a little bit easier, a little bit bigger. It's okay if we have a little tiny bit of overlap. I think that's okay. All right, so here are my two asphalt layers. I'm going to merge them together. I'm going to Option, click and drag. Again, I'm going to merge those two together. And just by doing this, it just means I can get through this significantly faster. And again, I won't quite know what this looks like until I, of course, bring it over into Blender, which I think is going to be part 3, just because I think that this is taking a little bit longer than I had wanted to. Okay, so I think that's it. It looks like when I zoom out, I don't know if you guys can see this in the video, that there's a little line there, a little white line. So the real test is to just go zoom in, and if you can't see it, it doesn't really exist. Okay, so I'm going to pause for a little bit. I'm going to finish up the brickwork for all the rest of my little pieces, and then I'll come back and I'll show you the door and I'll show you the window, and then we'll wrap up. Okay, so I'm back and I've bricked up this whole thing. It's quite a bit. Up here on the top, you'll notice that I have some brick texture spilling over onto this island and this island. This island here is the door, and this island here is the window. It shouldn't matter though, because I'm going to put the door texture in now, and it will go on top of this brick texture, in which case it'll cover it up and you shouldn't see it. And same thing with the window texture here. So we'll know when we know. All right. So now what I want to do is I need to bring in the door texture and the window texture. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in the door texture. Comes in quite large. I need to scale it down. Press return when you're happy with it. I'm going to put it above, so I'm dragging it up through my layer list here, and as long as it's underneath my UVs, I'm pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in, and here it is right here. So again, shift click, and so you can scale it properly so it doesn't, that looks pretty good there. Okay, so that looks pretty good there. Sometimes you might find that now I've been scaling from one of the four corners. If you scale from the top handle or the middle handles, you will distort your layer. However, sometimes you need to distort your layer a little bit, and if you can't notice it, then it's not a big deal. Okay, so that's good. So now I'm going to go ahead and bring in the factory window. Again, it comes in as its own layer, which is nice. And what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to scale this in. And remember earlier in part 1, it said that I would have to do some work on this. Whoops. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate this 90 degrees. And what I basically want to do now is I want to do some cleanup on this layer. I don't want this edge here, and I certainly don't want this bottom row here. So I'm going to try kind of an old trick here. So here's my factory window layer at the top. I'm going to come up here and grab the rectangular selection tool. And I'm going to go ahead and just make a rectangular selection around the part of the window that I don't want. Once I have that selected, and it's a kind of this dirty, rusty trim, I'm going to then press the delete key. Okay, so unfortunately, okay, so Photoshop has made this a smart object, or at least that's what it's saying, and that's, I'd forgotten, that's what this icon is right here, if you can see in the thumbnail here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and right click on this, and I'm going to choose this command here called rasterize layer. And it looks like that's also happened to my door, so I'll do that. Alright, so now I'm going to try that again. So I'm back on my factory window, I've got my rectangular selection tool, and I'm going to select the part that I don't want to keep, and now I'll press delete, and basically you can see, boom, it lets me clear it off. Okay, to get rid of this selection, I'm going to press Command D. So that's pretty much it. I'm going to come down here to the bottom, take my rectangular selection tool, select the gold rust part that I don't want, press delete. If I press Command D, if I make a mistake, I can just do undo or edit, step backwards. And so now I'm going to go ahead and grab this bottom section here, press delete. That looks pretty good. Command D. Takes a little trial and error, a little getting used to. Command D. There we go. Delete. Command D. And now I have a nicely trimmed window, at least I think. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to scale this up. Now this is where I could run into a problem, because as you can see here, I've got 3 windows, so I've got one of 2 things. I could try to duplicate this and make a 4th window, or I could go ahead and scale it. Like I said, sometimes that's okay, and if I just scaled it and I just stretch the side one there, when I press return, if it looks okay and it fits, it's going to work, or it should work. So I'm going to go ahead and say that that's going to work, and we'll see in just a moment. Okay, so in part 3, the final part, I will bring this together and put it into the game engine, and we'll see what this looks like, and we'll go from there. Okay, I'll see you in part 3.